this is the vineyard wine, and therefore, because we have to age them a lot, the quality has to be high, and there are no differences between the vintages. We make the wine so that we don't distinguish ourselves. We cheat ourselves all the time. Me to my sister to me, my father, we're always doing blind tastings because we don't distinguish. We can distinguish the vintage because we can know how our wines evolve in the bottle, and we can notice which one is more round, and then we can sort of more or less find out that it's a previous or an older vintage, but not because we really distinguish the character of the vintage. You only distinguish the character of the vintages in the Gran Reservas, and there are only 31. We don't make vintage wines. The vintage was obligatory to be introduced only from 1981 and is a European Union law. And you have to understand that it's not a winemaking law. I mean, one thing is the way you make the wine, another thing is how the laws are made to control falsification, and the reason why it's obligatory to introduce the vintage is that the governments and the DOs couldn't control the blendings. You know, it's like it was much more open to fakes and to falsification and to not being able to control wine coming from other areas, etc. But it's not really because it was like an obligation or a commitment from the winemakers to make vintage wines. And then the industry has gone into, for marketing purpose, into let's taste vintage, and everybody wants to taste the next vintage or the next vintage. But in Spain, the people who are consumers of Tondonia, they sometimes remember Tondonia sexto año, Gravonia cuarto año. There were no vintage wines, and they just drink Gravonia, Tondonia, no matter the vintage. The wine shops in Spain never taste the vintage, because you can release, I mean, whenever we finish one, we give them the next, and nobody cares. It's the new generations who talk about different vintage, and you will find that within one vintage we have different lots of wines.